Hi, my name is Asya, and in this voiceover video, I'll tell you how I make those short, traditional animations on sticky notes. Well, you don't necessarily have to do them on sticky notes, but what's key fact about this is that it's traditional animation, so done with pencil, and I won't focus here on drawing, but rather on the whole process, how you can make your drawings move. So let's get to it. I'm not using too many tools for this animation process. It's basically just sticky notes and a pencil. And one more thing, you don't have to use sticky notes. I do like them. Their paper is very thin, so I don't really need any lightbox. I do use lightbox sometimes because it's always helpful, but I'm just saying that for you, you don't necessarily have to have it if you're using thin paper. And another thing that's cool about sticky notes is that I can stick one to another and they don't move, so I'm sure the next drawing is going to be pretty accurate if I position the note correctly. The paper won't move in the process of me drawing, so that's also why I like them. But unfortunately, the glue of the back of the sticky note can pick up a pencil from the previous sticky note, so there's one more thing I use, which is plastic sleeve between those sticky notes. And then it's all about keeping the plastic sleeve in one place, so I don't need some tape as well. But at the very beginning, I wasn't using plastic sleeves. I was just drawing away on those sticky notes. I use a rather soft pencil, and usually my favorite one, mechanical 0.5 at B or 2B, so that the line is dark with the first stroke and I don't have to keep pressing the pencil really hard and do many lines in one place. It's just visible at the first stroke. Okay, so let's talk about the process. The process in general, I would say, divides into two stages. First one being the traditional that happens with pencil and paper, and then the second one being digital, where you put together all your drawings to make them move. Okay, we gotta start somewhere. So the first step would be to draw the action. Or not even the action, the first frame. And some people start from drawing storyboards or writing the ideas, but those sticky note animations have the purpose of being quick and sketchy, and rather themselves being sort of a storyboard and not really something polished, finished, and very detailed. So I would stay away. At least I don't do any storyboards. Maybe I do a few sketches outside of those sticky notes first and then try to redraw them a bit cleaner. But in general, I start from just drawing the first frame with already an idea in my head of how to animate it. And this is something that unfortunately I can't teach you in such a short tutorial. So if you want to get better at animation and making your drawings move, knowing how to draw the next frame or how many frames you need, you basically have to experiment and start somewhere. It doesn't just happen overnight, and you won't just be able to know all that. You have to learn that. And to learn that, the best would be to observe other animations and observe the objects that you maybe want to animate. Think in frames, think in movements. So there's a lot to the process, but luckily we're starting from something simple so that everybody can do it. And maybe just a few quick notes what not to do at this stage in case you want to jump straight away into drawing the first frame. Remember that this is an animation, and in animation, in this traditional way, you'll have to draw the same thing many times. Well, yeah, quite a few. If you decide to go for at least 10 frames and it's a character blinking or just a hair moving, you'll have to draw the same face 10 times. So make sure this is something simple and something you want to draw this many times. And of course, there's quite a lot that can go wrong in the process, so just make sure you're patient enough or you don't overwork yourself, you don't put too much pressure on yourself. Yeah, I have animations that didn't work out and I had to throw them away to the bin and just wasted many hours. So keep that in mind. It might not work out, or it might not be as simple as you have thought. So if that's just your first one, let's animate a ball jumping. That's definitely gonna do well, and it's rather hard to fail. So the next step is actually draw the rest. And as scary as this may sound, it's actually pretty simple. How I do it is I draw either the next stage in action, so if that's character blinking, then it would be the same face with one eye closed. And then if I think the animation is a bit rough and a bit, it doesn't have enough frames, I would then go back and draw in between frames later. Or if that's more complicated action, I can either move forward into the next stage, what I think could work in the animation, or into the last stage, and then try to draw in between frames. It does take a little bit of experimenting and drawing different animations and trying for yourself and watching how others did it. But depending what you want to animate, your process might be completely different. So I'm not going to focus here on how to draw the animation, but how you can make the process of drawing work for you. So just make sure the next, I'll say sticky note because I'm using sticky notes, is positioned correctly, or that you're pressing pencil with the same strength, or at least trying to, that you're not overworking lines, that it's just a similar style, so it's not more sketchy or less sketchy than the previous frame. Try to make them look as similar as possible. Of course, the lines are going to be a bit shaky and not perfect, but this is what's actually super cool about traditional animation, and I really like this effect. I would even sometimes draw a character without any movement, without any action, but drawing the same character many times and animating it, just playing the animation of the exactly same frame but drawn a few times separately, it already sort of creates this slight movement, and I really like this effect. So no stressing, whatever you want to draw and animate, just do it and experiment. You won't learn anything if you don't try. There are animations that took me a few hours to do, which is the least. It always takes at least an hour or a few hours to do. But there is an animation on sticky notes that I put a bit more work into, and that's the Kickstarter animation, which actually took me 9 days and nights to complete. And that was already after I've had an idea, after I experimented a bit. It was just clean animation, a lot more work and a lot more thinking process and trying to make it work as smooth as possible. But yeah, that was definitely jumping into the next level for me, and I admit it wasn't simple. So whatever you want to animate, just do it. When I think that my animation is complete, I photograph all the frames or sometimes scan them, but when I photograph the frames, it's nicer because I can put pencil next to them to show that this is a traditional animation, and in general I just like the effect a bit more. So if you want to do the same technique, how I do it, I put my phone on an arm holder so that it's definitely in one place and it's not moving, and I turn the camera on, and when I'm taking pictures I try to touch as delicately as possible not to make any unwanted shakes, which could move my photograph by like this 1 millimeter off, which could already cause a problem. But I can show you how to fix it later. But I am still very careful to take good photographs anyway. I liked my desk equally. So I've got 2 lamps that I put on both sides of the sticky note, trying to make sure that the pencil isn't shiny and I can see it properly in my camera. And I put 1 empty sticky note in the exact space where I want all my frames to be in, so that when I take the frame away, I still have this empty piece of paper to tell me where exactly to put another one. Just make sure you don't move that first piece of paper when you're sticking in and out all the following frames. So when I took all the photographs that I needed of all the frames that I created, the first thing I do is usually trying to preview the animation first on my phone if it works or if it needs any more frames before I move into editing them on a computer. So my phone, which is Samsung, has this option. If you select all the photographs from the gallery, from the place where all your pictures are stored, it asks you if you want to create GIF animation, anyway, and you can try to play it on your phone, change speeds, and see if the basics work, if there is the movement that you were intending to create. And if I like what it looks like on my phone, then I just transfer all the photographs to my computer. And let's move to the next step. So the next step for me is just editing the photographs. And of course, positioning them correctly, because there are definitely slight movements from one to the other photograph, or the positioning of the sticky notes, since I'm doing it manually, might be also slightly off. So I put all the pictures in one Photoshop file, one on top of another, and I change the mode to either darken or multiply, and make sure to tiny bit nudge all the photos so that they are aligned to the first frame. Or sometimes I'm not aligning paper to one piece to another, but I'm looking at the drawing, because I also could be off when drawing one frame to another, and I also pay attention to those. If the character is in still position in one position, but I moved the piece of paper a bit too much, then I wouldn't align the edges of the paper, but I would align the drawing. Also, many of my animations are just strictly for Instagram, so I make sure to crop the size of the photograph accordingly, and I use standard dimensions 1080 by 864. When I have all my frames positioned and probably also cropped, I change the mode back again to normal so that no frames are overlaying one another, and then I go to editing. And this is what is my usual process. I put all the frame above the first frame into a group and create a mask on top of them. The reason for that is just so that there are no unwanted changes of light on the pencil, since my pencil is usually very reflective, it's metal, and my slight movements when taking the photograph could cause it have different lights and colors and would distract people from watching the animation. I use only one picture for the pencil and just animate the actual frames. So I make a selection with 20 or 10 pixels soft feather and put a mask on top of the whole group of photographs. Then on top of all the layers, I put all the filters to make my pictures a bit cleaner, brighter, and generally looking nicer. This is usually a divide layer with the white color of the background and maybe some filters to soften the light if I think there's need for such a thing. Or, levels, brightness, contrast, color balance slightly, because the sticky notes are very ugly yellow, so I try to make them a bit less yellow. You can see the filters that I use in the Photoshop file that I'm providing with this tutorial. And I also, just to be on the safe side, put a watermark with my name on top of everything, so that when people find my animation in the internet, they can sort of find me by the name. And of course, don't forget to save your file and probably make a copy, like a backup copy, because the next step is animation. So if you want to keep a file without the animation in it, but just with all the effects and frames, then keep this as a separate file to make the actual animation. Finally, the most rewarding step, which is the actual animation. Or sometimes the most disappointing one, because there is a chance the animation is not gonna work and I'm not gonna like it and I might trash everything that I've done so far. But regardless, this is the most fun because you get to see how your frames are finally moving now. So to be ready for this step, just go to Window and open Timeline in Photoshop, unless you already have it open. And then on the timeline, click Create Video Timeline. And once you click, there's all your layers are gonna get changed into a layer on the timeline. But I am not a very big fan of this method of animating, so I revert back to the previous one from before the update when they made Photoshop look a bit more like Premiere Pro. And I just click this little tiny icon with boxes to revert back to frame by frame animation rather than animating on the actual timeline. Then on the timeline only one box appears, which to me seems like a lot easier thing to control rather than having all of those layers on a separate timeline. So that first frame is your first frame of the animation. So you want to make it your first frame, which basically means switching off all the layers of other frames that you don't want to be showing up right now and covering your first frame. And when the first frame is up and I choose the time, which is probably usually for me 0.2 or 0.3 for the animation, and I click a new frame. And for new frame, I put visibility of one more layer, which is on top of my first frame, which is my second frame. And then again, new frame, I turn visibility of the third layer, which is my third frame, and so on until I've got all the frames as separate animation frames. Well, since Photoshop is not quite a video editing program, I would recommend to keeping it simple and not trying to edit too much or adding any new layers after you have done all your animation frames, because it does create a lot of mess and hard to edit things. You change one thing and there's like a ripple effect where many things change and you don't really know how to control. At least I ended up being in this situation so many times. I try to really plan it ahead and keep it simple, make all the edits before I make the animation move. And then when I'm making actual frames, I try not to add any more layers and keep it as simple as possible. You can preview your animation at every stage just by pressing spacebar, and make sure to set it at the bottom of the timeline to loop forever so that it doesn't stop playing after it plays once, but it keeps playing so you can get a better view. And now, I guess the last step, which is basically just exporting the animation. Let's move on. Cool, so now the animation is done and the last step is to export it for whatever use you might want to have. Basically it's probably posting on Instagram or Twitter or any other platform, so I'll show you how to export it both as video and as a GIF image. GIF? Because for Instagram it's better to put it out as a video. For Twitter, I think also video, but Twitter as well reads GIFs. For Patreon doesn't really read videos. It should be GIF for Patreon. For Tumblr, it's okay to have GIF image. So I'll just show you how to export both. So first things first, I saved the file separately from the file without the animation, so either with Ctrl or Command-Shift-S, just saving it with a actual animation. as an actual animation file so that I can always get back, and if I need to make edits, edit it again. And then, and only then, I make changes to the size of the file, because nobody really needs an animation that's so huge, and photographs are usually huge. So I do change the resolution or the size of the frames before I export it as anything, as video or as a GIF. So I get those Instagram dimensions that I mentioned before, 1080 by 864 pixels and 72 dpi or 144 dpi. That doesn't really matter for web browsing. To save the animation as a video file, in Photoshop, I go to File, Export, Render Video. The dialog box that comes up doesn't need much doing. It just asks you for the name of your file, so you can name your file. You can select folder where the file is gonna be saved, and about the sequence, I keep it at 30 FPS, which is frames per second, and document size, so I don't change any sizes here. I changed it just before exporting, so it is the size that I wanted it to be. And then range all frames, and I just hit render, and that's basically it. To save your animation as GIF, you gotta go again to File, Export, but now choose Save for Web. And now the dialog box that comes up is slightly different, but it also doesn't need too much changing. And honestly, I don't think I actually change anything. I just usually hit save, and you can check all the parameters like width, height, or quality, or anything really. Just make sure it's gonna be saving the animation as GIF. I'm sorry, I keep messing up the pronunciation. At the very top under preset, and that's it. That's everything I really usually check, and just hit save. And only when it doesn't work, then I try to find out why it doesn't work. But with those settings that you see on my screen, it should work. Hit save, and you've got your animation saved both as video and as a GIF animation, which is what we were getting to. So yeah, we finally made it, and we got through the process. So we made it through to the end, and I really hope that you found this tutorial useful and learned how to transform your traditional drawings into an animation the simplest way possible, but also like the very effective one, and that's something that produces high quality results. So I know it's quite a few steps, but you can't say it's difficult. Just follow carefully, and why not? Please feel free to share with me your animations. Thank you so much for your attention and for your support, and until next time, good luck!